Hey, good morning or good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is when you're watching this. Just going to make a little video and talk to you about comparing a general aviation trip to an airline trip. And if you know me, I love both, actually. Ever since I was a kid, all I wanted to do was be an airline pilot. At a very young age, I would take the airlines back and forth. My mom lived in Indiana, my dad lived in San Diego, so I took the airlines back and forth and absolutely fell in love with the airlines, and that's what I wanted to do for a job. But I also love general aviation, and just by kind of default, when I got laid off from my first job at the airlines, I started getting involved in general aviation more, and I've had a great experience in GA. So I thought I would just compare two trips, or like the trip that we're doing today, and how we would do that in the airline. So today we're traveling from Grand Forks down to Southwest Florida. We're actually going to Marco Island. We started going there, I think, 6 or 7 years ago. We wanted to go see a Minnesota Twins spring training game, and if you've ever been down there, it's a lot of fun. It's in Fort Myers. And we thought we'd stay like on a beach area. So we've tried a couple of different locations over the years, and we really enjoy Marco Island. It's a very laid back place, and so we stay at the Marriott there. It's just a great time for us to get away for a few days. So normally, if you know Grand Forks Airport, we only have one mainline airline. We only have Delta that serves Grand Forks, and Delta does fine, and we've flown on them for many years. There is Allegiant service. Allegiant Airlines serves Grand Forks, but they obviously are only going to limited kind of big destinations. So they'll go to Orlando out of Grand Forks, but that's quite a long ways from Southwest Florida. So we've always done Delta. This is actually our first time flying the Cessna 414, our family's airplane, down there. And the only reason we're doing it is actually because we're going to actually be going on beyond that and making some videos and doing some of that stuff. But normally for just my wife, Katie, and I to go down there, Delta makes a lot of sense. You know, we'll hop on Delta, just the two of us. It's kind of the most economical to take that all the way down to Fort Myers. We'll do a plane change in Minneapolis. We'll go to Fort Myers. We'll rent a car, and then we'll drive down to Marco Island. Depending on traffic, it'd be about an hour under the island. So today, this is kind of interesting because it's the first time that I can give a comparison of those two trips in general aviation versus the airlines. So today, since we're flying, normally it's a little over 1,500 nautical miles, and I'm going to always use nautical miles. The conversion is 1.15. So 1 nautical mile equals 1.15 statute miles, or the miles that you would use in your car. So it's a little over 1,500 miles down to Marco Island from Grand Forks. Now, we could do that in one fuel stop. Hang on. It's been smooth. We just started picking up some occasional light chop.
Roger, thank you.
So, so normally we could do that in one just under 4 hour segment, get some gas, and then another, call it 345. Today, shockingly, we were going to do 2 fuel stops just to be a little more comfort on the bladder. We don't have a big bathroom or anything on here. But today, the winds are 82 knots up at altitude, and they're almost right behind us. So our true airspeed, which is the speed that we're moving through the air, is 214 knots. I don't know if you can see that or not. 214. So 214 knots, and then our wind, which is at 81 knots, that's pushing us. That T means tailwind. We have a tailwind of 77 knots right coming from behind us. So that's pushing us over the ground at 288 knots. And in miles per hour, that is about 300, just ballpark at 325 miles an hour. Which I know if you're a jet driver, it's not that fast, but for a twin-engine piston aircraft like this, it's pretty awesome. So today we're going nonstop from Grand Forks down to Huntsville, which is over 900 miles. So it's a long ways, and we're doing that in about 3 hours and 20 minutes. So that's pretty rare. We usually wouldn't be that fast. So 3 hours and 20 minutes to Huntsville, and then about 2.5 hours all the way down to Marco Island. So let's call it 6 hours of flying time is what it's going to really come down to be, about 6 hours of flying time. Now, just the other day I went in, I don't know if you can see the phone here, I went in just to look at what the options are out of Grand Forks here. Now, this was 2 days ago, so it is very expensive. This is an economy option on Delta, and it's expensive because it's 2 days before, we didn't plan out. If you plan out, obviously you can find a slightly cheaper rate. But what's interesting here is, so the departure time options to go to RSW, which is Fort Myers, I could leave at 5:35 a.m., arrive in Fort Myers at 11:54 a.m. That's a total travel time of 5 hours and 20 minutes. What everybody out of Grand Forks knows, though, the layover time in Minneapolis is 32 minutes. And if you know in Minneapolis, we'd probably get in at the A or B gates, run over to the Gulf gates, and probably miss our connection. But it is possible, and I have done that. But this is normally what like my wife and I would do. We would do the 10:51 a.m. departure. We'd arrive in Fort Myers at 5:16 p.m. with a 50-minute connection time in Minneapolis. That's a total travel time of about 5 hours and 25 minutes. Now, what you're going to hear those goofballs talking on, it's called GUARD. It's an emergency frequency, and there's always some goofballs talking. So I'm going to turn that off just for a minute here. So 5 hours and 25 minutes. We would normally leave at 10:51 a.m. Now, when you think about that, though, right, you have to first go through, you got to park, and then you got to go through TSA. And that whole process of waiting and then boarding the aircraft, you generally get there, let's say in Grand Forks, you never have to get there more than an hour. But let's just say an hour ahead of time. So now we're at 6 hours and 25 minutes. And then you have to go through the terminal, deplane, get the car in Fort Myers, and then drive down to Marco. So really, it's going to end up being close to probably, close to 8 hours, not quite 8 hours. So it's almost an 8-hour travel day on the airlines. And again, we've done that every year for, like I said, 6-7 years now, and it works fine. I think one time we missed our connection, and during springtime, all the flights are busy, so we got to spend the whole day in Minneapolis. Very fortunate we were able to get on the night flight. I think we got to Marco at like 11-something p.m. And that happens once in a while. And, you can get delays and have maintenance problems or weather problems in these airplanes too. So, just like the airlines have those problems and they make the news, general aviation has the same issues. So apples to apples, you can have a big delay just like that. But it is about the same amount of time, even without those tailwinds, it's about the same amount of travel time to go from Grand Forks all the way down to Marco Island. Now, when you're comparing costs, though, the reason that, again, Katie and I don't take this airplane down is because it's a twin engine. It's got 8 seats in here now. You can do up to 9 seats. So it's a huge airplane, and it's burning tons and tons of gas. So it's definitely not the economical way to go, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of planning versus, hey, you pay whatever Delta's charging, and you show up, and they do a good job. And they get you down to Fort Myers. It's easy, and it's way more economical when it's 2 people. If you had 6 people, though, on board the aircraft, you saw the prices generally in the spring at peak season are like $1,000 a person, then actually it would be economical, or at least, close to taking this airplane versus flying the airlines. Now, cost aside, again, time savings and convenience and just being able to drive right to the plane, load your bags up, and then go is obviously the best part about flying general aviation. Once we get down to Marco Island, they're going to pull a vehicle up for us. We're going to hop in the vehicle and drive right to the hotel. There's no going out, finding a rental car. Usually the rental car is parked right next to your airplane. It's really a great experience. And just as an example, people are like, well, what if I don't have a bigger airplane? You know what? I'm a big believer in GA and all kinds of planes. I have friends that they share an old Piper. They share an old Mooney. I have friends that share a Cirrus. I have friends that own a Cessna 150. Friends that own old classic airplanes, antique airplanes. And I always say there's a range and a budget for whatever you want. So an example I give in class is when we fly down to Destin, Florida. That's up on the Panhandle. That's about 1,000 miles. And I'll say, okay, we're going to take off out of Grand Forks. And I compare, again, Delta versus flying general aviation. In our plane, it's 3.5 hours generally to St. Louis. We fill up in St. Louis, and it's generally 2.5 hours down to Destin, Florida. Ironically, the same exact flight times today, but with that wind, we're able to go all the way to South Florida. So we take off from Grand Forks. We do one fuel stop. We go to Destin, Florida. And again, people are like, oh, that's a big plane. It's expensive. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I buy that. But let's say I have a 1975 Cessna 172, and there's 3 of you that, let's say I'm going to fly this old 172 down to Destin, Florida. I go, what does that thing cruise at? And they're like, 100, 110 knots. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to fly that, and I can take 2 of you with us and all our bags. I'm going to leave here at noon. I'm like, how long is it going to take me to get there? And they're like, probably 8 or 9 hours. I'm like, okay, we'll leave here at noon. We'll be to Destin by, probably 9 p.m. And who wants to join me on the beach having a beer on the beach at 9 o'clock tonight in Destin? And everybody kind of raises their hand, And if you look at the actual fuel burn of that airplane and you divide it by 3 people, it's actually pretty economical. So I always, use that like renting or using a 172 and sharing it between three people. And then I pull up like Delta, like the Delta schedule. Well, to go on Delta for that trip to Destin, you fly from Grand Forks to Minneapolis. Then you have to go Minneapolis to Atlanta. And then you fly Atlanta to VPS, which is Fort Walton. It's on the north side of the bay down there. Victor Papa Sierra, that's the airport code. So they will fly you there. Then you rent a car. Then you drive about 45 minutes, 50 minutes around the bay down to where we would stay in the Miramar Beach area. So when you add up those three legs, you can do it faster in a Cessna 172 going down to Destin. And yeah, that's not South Florida, but it's interesting that you can actually get there faster than the airlines flying in a 1975 four-seat airplane. So I always encourage people, if you're looking into general aviation or making comparisons, you have to kind of look at like, what is your mission? If it's just for fun or leisure, sometimes old Moonies are like very fuel efficient, pretty quick airplanes. If the mission is like business and you need to get there quicker, and you're working with a bigger regional company, you might have a bigger budget. You might be looking at like a turboprop, maybe like a King Air or a Pilatus, or people that are flying, for big corporations, or even medium-sized corporations, they might be flying in the jet market. But anyway, pretty cool to use general aviation. And today is an example where we're actually able to beat Delta in terms of speed down to Marco Island, just again because of the tailwind. Normally, like I said, it would be apples to apples. But anyway, just thought I'd share with you kind of the comparison between general aviation in a trip and the airlines. Hope you enjoyed it.